Here's a live look at Calgary this hour, where it is 9:30 in the morning. A sunny day there, currently sitting at 4 degrees. Good morning to everyone. I'm John Northcott. Here are some of the stories that we're working on for you. Prince William is a dad for the third time to another boy. The Duke of Cambridge emerging a short while ago from the hospital where his wife Catherine gave birth. Both mother and son are said to be doing well. The new royal baby is fifth in line to the throne. There's a lot of excitement about the new prince's birth. People have lots of questions, and now's the time to have those questions answered. Thomas Daigle and Camilla Tominey, royal editor for the Sunday Express, are outside of the hospital taking your questions. So log on and ask away. We're streaming this live on CBC News' Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So, Thomas and Camilla, welcome. Let's talk about how we would perhaps explain what is the enduring fascination of the birth of a royal baby.
Well, I think everyone loves a baby, John, anyway, and loves to hear news of a birth. Obviously, when it's the Cambridge's baby, that's extra special. And it's surprising to see so many people here for a third child. There was a suggestion, oh, no one really cares about a third baby because we've had George and we've had Charlotte. Actually, no, there are still hundreds of media covering this, loads of well-wishers around us, so just members of the public who have come down for this occasion. And I think generally there's a lot of goodwill behind the royal family at the moment, not just because of William and Kate and their own family moment today, but also in the run-up to the royal wedding, because of all of the fever and speculation around Harry and Meghan's nuptials. I think it's kind of increased interest in the royal family in general.
Absolutely. There is also, of course, great interest in what the name of the child could be. What are some of the possibilities? And as much as we can tell, what goes into that decision about what to name a royal child?
Well,
I just actually took a picture
Oh, okay.
a little earlier of the bookmakers had the list out, top picks for royal baby name, as we now know it's a boy. Arthur, James, and Albert, the top picks. John is not on the list, John. But what?
Shame.
But
Neither is Camilla, funny enough.
what kind of decision making goes into choosing that name?
Well, obviously they look at all names and see whether there's an appropriate historical context. Arthur's obviously been associated with royalty in the past, so has Albert. James is an interesting one because, of course, Kate's brother's called James. So there's already that name in the family, so that might be a little off left field. And then Philip is in the frame in homage to the child's great-grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh. So I think any of those options, it's always a classic royal name. You know, they don't go for anything too alternative, anything too new age. They're pretty traditional. And interestingly, they might also consult with Prince Charles and the Queen when it comes to the name. And we won't hear it, not today, probably not tomorrow, maybe in a couple of days' time, we'll have that announcement. So they enjoy the baby first before they let us know what they've named him.
And of course, it's St. George's Day. There's already a George in the family. It's Shakespeare's birthday, and there's already William in the family, as we've been saying throughout the day. It doesn't seem like those names are going to be likely now, John.
Let's talk about Arthur a bit, because it is, as you say, very high on the list, Thomas, and yet his father has Arthur, of one of his many names. His grandfather has Arthur as many names, and of course, King Arthur, going way back in history, it certainly has a lot of resonance, but is it potentially overused?
I don't think overused, actually, to be honest, because there's been so many Georges and Williams. Overuse of a royal name isn't a problem. And we have to bear in mind that this child has a bit more freedom when it comes to being named, because very unlikely that this prince will become king. So sixth in line to the throne, less down the pecking order. So a name like Arthur's fine. And of course, the legend surrounding King Arthur, there's a lot of Britishness tied in with that. You know, there's quite a lot of tradition and pride around the name Arthur, so that's good. And as you said, sometimes they do borrow names that have been in their father or their ancestry. So it's not a bar that William's middle name is Arthur. He can pass that on without any problem.
Now, this would be the third baby for Will and Kate. Let's talk about how this child, as we say, fifth in line, but how will this child's upbringing and life potentially be different from those closer in line to succession?
It's the first time in a long time that we have a second spare to the heir,
Yes.
right? How's that going to affect his life?
It's unfair, isn't it? It sounds a bit unkind to say that Charlotte's the spare to the heir. Sixth in line to the throne, currently a position, fifth in line to the throne, currently a position that Prince Harry's got. It's interesting because we've obviously got 4 generations of monarchy all still alive, which is somewhat unprecedented because of the Queen's longevity and the extent of her reign, now 65 years. Really, I think the life of this child will be similar to George and Charlotte's in that they'll be in the limelight, there'll be interest in them as a trio, and also even when you're further down the pecking order, you still have a role to play. If you look at somebody like Prince Edward, the Queen's 4th child, he's going to take on the role of Duke of Edinburgh, he's going to run the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. Him and his wife Sophie, they're not on the front cover of every newspaper and magazine, but they do a very good charitable job. They do a lot of engagements every year. Somebody like Princess Anne as well, pushed down the pecking order because she was female before the laws were changed. She's probably one of the most prolific royals we have in the family. She carries out hundreds of engagements every year. It's just a bit below radar. So if the 3rd baby can find a niche, then they'll have a role to play in society, no doubt about it.
Let's talk about the leaving of the hospital, because we're hearing from people, and this is some of the viewer questions we're getting. So Lynn Armstrong Rainford asks this. Now, has the mother left the hospital yet? Of course, that's why we're all watching. Has not left yet, but we saw the prince driving away in his own 4x4 there. Is that what will happen? What is the process to get that baby safely back home?
Well, I can say that we spotted William saying, "I'll be back in a minute." So he's
Yes.
likely gone to the palace to see George and Charlotte. What's bound to happen now?
So go back to the palace and see George and Charlotte. Make sure that they're in the right frame of mind to come down here, which I'm sure they are. Make sure they're in their finery, because we don't get to see the children that often. And when it's a set-piece event like this, Kate particularly will want them to look immaculate. So I'd imagine at the moment William is with the nanny, making sure they're looking presentable. And then we're going to see a very hands-on fatherly role here. You'll remember with Prince George and Princess Charlotte, Prince William drove them away. There was a famous moment with Prince George where he was trying to get the baby seat, every parent's nightmare this, doing it in front of the world's cameras, into the back of the car to make sure everything was ready to go to drive off. So we see that a lot with the parents, and the Cambridges are basically trying to make us know that they are quite like us. Yes, they're royal, yes, they have a lot of privilege and responsibility, but also they're normal parents taking their children home from hospital. And that will mean that daddy drives. I mean, because everyone else in life, usually the father drives home.
And did I understand correctly, you have 3 children of your own?
Yes.
And so on a personal level, what does a 3rd child have to expect at home?
Personally speaking, I think going from 1 to 2 is harder than 2 to 3, because if you have a toddler and then a baby, that's hard work. George is older now, so he can do a bit of fetching and carrying. Charlotte will be doting on the child just because that's what older sisters do, right, with little babies. Funnily enough, I was heavily pregnant when George was born. It was very hot here in the middle of July. I was 2 weeks off giving birth and rolling around here like no one's business, and the policeman here actually gave me a seat, so I was in privileged position. So I've got a child exactly the same age, but that's my youngest. As any of the parents who are watching this show know, it's tricky, but they've got help. Unlike a lot of this, they've got a nanny at home and an entourage, so I think they'll be okay. But of course it's an adjustment, and then everything caters for a family of 4, right? So they might have to get a new car, maybe a 7-seater to give them more room. Whenever they book a holiday, they have to pay for 1 extra child. We all know that drill, and who knows if they'll stop here? What if they have a 4th, Thomas?
Who knows? But I think they'll make out okay.
I think they'll be fine.
Guys, I understand that you will be continuing on live. We are going to leave you here on CBC News Network for now, but thank you for what has been a fantastic chat about the challenges and the joys of what the new 3rd royal child will present for these parents. The CBC's Thomas Daigle and Camilla Tominey, the royal editor of the Sunday Express.
All right, we are still online on YouTube, on Facebook, and other CBC News platforms. So we can take our earpieces out. We don't have to listen to the program. Don't have to listen to the program anymore. We're taking your questions on Facebook. If you want to add those to the comments, we're going to take them, and I'm going to put them to Camilla, and we're going to try our best to get to as many questions as we can over the next 15 minutes or so. Here's one from Sandra Lafleur. Sandra asks, is it 6th or 5th in line, succession, clearly she's asking about. Explain, please. I thought it was fifth. And there's a whole added dimension of this legislation that has changed the way this is now decided. So can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sorry, Sandra, because I was saying that Harry is now sixth and had been fifth because he's now been knocked down the pecking order by the new child. So you've got William, who's second in line to the throne, George, who's third, Charlotte, who's fourth, and now the new baby, the prince, fifth. Now, in the old days, an older daughter would be superseded by a younger brother, if that makes sense. So Princess Anne, even though she's older than the Duke of York, would be further down the pecking order just because she's a girl. Totally unfair, seems completely out of date. So a few years ago, the law was changed, in fact, before Prince George was born, to make sure that if Prince George was a daughter, that daughter would become queen and wouldn't be superseded by a younger brother.
Still a long ways down the road, but it's good that, that's already been sorted out.
And I think as well, just for future generations, what if Prince George's first child is a girl? It's completely representative of modern life and modern Britain. It's very 21st century, and with the Me Too movement and everything else, how could the royals be behind on that one? It would seem completely out of date.
Diane Morgan Spurrell asks, do we have any details, weight, length, hair color? I know that the Kensington Palace statement that was put out a few hours ago said that the child weighed 8 pounds 7 ounces, but in terms of any other details, we're still waiting for that first picture when the family emerges. Might be tonight, might be tomorrow. What's your thinking on that?
I personally think today, but that's with my maternal hat on, not my journalistic one, simply because when you have a third baby, you're just very keen to get home and make sure the family unit gels nicely and that the newest child gels with the siblings. On length and things, 8 pounds 7, interestingly, it's quite heavy in royal terms. When George was born, I think we were told at 8 pounds 3, he was the heaviest royal baby in 100 years. So the babies, George and Charlotte, both the same weight, and then this baby a little heftier. It's interesting as well because, of course, Kate suffered terribly with really extreme morning sickness. She's always been very svelte, so there's always this notion, is she going to have a small baby? And she's always had quite big babies, even though she herself has remained very thin with a bump, of course, but always seemed to be thin, and no doubt as well, now feeling under pressure to snap back into shape for the royal wedding, less than 4 weeks away?
Yeah, less than a month away. I'm just going to grab this earpiece from you, Camilla, get that out of the way. And there's a bit of excitement. Maybe we'll get out of the way because it looks to me like there's been a royal arrival here. An SUV pulling up. There's Prince William opening the back door to that SUV. Presumably the children, George and Charlotte, are in the back. We're giving you a live look here as best we can. There's little George wearing his Sunday best for the crowds. Looks a little sheepish. No wave from George as he's in school uniform. It's a school uniform, Camilla tells me. And so he is helping his father get George's little sister, Charlotte, who is almost 3 now, and there they are. To awes and applause from the crowd. Charlotte wearing a blue dress there. And they are going into the Lindo wing of St. Mary's Hospital to see their little brother for the first time. Very exciting moment for the crowds who are assembled here. Some people who've been outside the Lindo wing here waiting for a moment like that for the past 2 weeks. How long are they going to be inside until we see the rest of the family come out? We'll see. But I want to ask you, Camilla, what you thought of that. And it's so rare to see George and Charlotte at such big public events. What did you make of that?
Super sweet. There was lots of cooing and umming and ahhing here. So cute. George coming straight from school, so his little jumper, he goes to school in Battersea. He must have finished about an hour and a half ago and has come straight here. Little Charlotte dressed in a lovely blue dress. No doubt a sign that she's got a little brother. Poor thing, she's in a boy sandwich, Charlotte now. No sister for her little brother. Really cute. And William obviously absolutely eager to just get home, get the children and go and introduce them to their little brother and to mummy. Actually, when older children have a younger sibling, they're always a bit worried. Mummy goes into hospital early in the morning. Is she all right? Is the baby all right? So I think the children will just be keen to get in there and make sure everything's okay.
You mentioned William going home to get the children. He is said to be somewhat of a hands-on dad.
Yes.
One viewer asks, it's Julia Landry says, the nannies do everything. But I'd like to put that to you. Is that how true is that?
No, that's not quite true. Look, the nanny's there, and she's a Norland trained nanny, so that's like the top notch. The nanny to meet all nannies is Maria. She's very committed and she's very hands-on, and she helps with the children. To be fair though, Kate does do the school run with George as much as she can, and the parents make sure that they're here and hands-on to tuck them in at night, read them bedtime stories. If they weren't hands-on, to be fair, they wouldn't take the children on royal engagements. They take them on royal tours, and they make the royal tours as short as possible if they're not with them, because they don't like not seeing the children. That is a massive step change from the old days where the Queen would go on tour to Australia for 6 months. Nowadays you'll hardly get the Cambridges, if they're not with the kids, on a tour longer than a week, because they want to be there. And let's not forget, okay, William's born into royal life. Kate's quite a homely person. She's very close to her parents. She's always been very family orientated. She's a bit of a homebody. She doesn't want to be separated from her children. Why would she be? So yes, they have help. Yes, they have no money worries. They don't have to pay the mortgage like you and I. But they're hands-on parents, I would suggest. It's pretty modern behind palace gates these days.
Diane Winther asks, how is Kate doing overall? We know from the statement from Kensington Palace earlier that the baby and the mother were both doing well. We don't know whether she is going to be released today or not, but can you talk a bit you mentioned earlier the possibility of another sibling coming down the line, maybe, but it was, again, a difficult pregnancy for Kate.
Difficult pregnancy, although she carried on doing some royal engagements from the second trimester onwards. So she had the hyperemesis gravidarum in the first 8 weeks, 8 to 10, 12 weeks. And that's awful because you just feel sick the whole time, apparently, according to other women. That the children are here and that they've made these announcements pretty swiftly, my personal opinion suggests that Kate's doing okay. No, everyone out there who's had a baby knows labour isn't easy. That's why it's called labour. And obviously she's got to have time to recover from that, which she will, and she's not going to be doing engagements now until autumn. But yeah, I think she's going to be fine. If she's seeing her other children, I think she's done really well, and she's had the baby, in 5 hours, so not bad at all.
Joseph Bitton asks a good question. When are they coming to Canada?
When are they coming? Well, you know what? I was in Canada for the first ever tour. They came to you, didn't they, in 2011? I remember Kate on Canada Day wearing that white and red outfit. She looked fantastic. You have got royal links in Canada, though, can I point out? You've got Meghan, who's practically a Canadian citizen. Might even have they announced about Trudeau going to the wedding? No heads of state, so maybe not.
No heads of government.
Maybe
doesn't look like
his
he's going to be there. It may be, because there is that family connection.
They might get away with that because they don't want to put anyone's noses out of joints by having some heads of state and not others. But Canada's so high on the list of priorities for Commonwealth countries that royals must visit. So I would think the Cambridges are going to come back to Canada in the next 5 years. I think you've got to put money on that.
You mentioned Meghan Markle, and I'll put this question to you from Eric Carlson. It's a bit off topic regarding the baby, but I'm sure you can answer this one pretty easily. Eric Carlson asks, we keep hearing that Meghan Markle will become a British royal. How is that possible when she was born and raised in California and not anywhere in the United Kingdom?
Because she's probably going to get dual citizenship, so we know she's going to go through the British citizenship test. Kensington Palace said, Brian, that they're not going to fast track her. She's going to have to jump through the hoops that anyone jumps through to become resident here. But because she's marrying somebody British, obviously she's got the right to apply for a British passport. Whether she's going to still remain an American citizen as well, and of course you can be have dual citizenship. In fact, even our Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has dual citizenship because he was born in New York, so it's all possible.
I'd like to ask you, as someone who's been covering this for some time, how does this arrival of this royal baby compared to George and Charlotte? Pretty
much the same kind of thing, the same amount of media, the same amount of well-wishers. Maybe actually the other children have tipped the balance. I think first, everyone said, third baby, will anyone care? But I think it's the notion of seeing George and Charlotte and imagining them as a family of 5, and that there's added colour to the event. And that's the same for all events now. Trooping the colour has got a bit more interesting because you can see George on the palace balcony. So these younger royal children, as was the case with William and Harry, let's face it, when they were growing up, they garner a great deal of interest, a great deal of goodwill. And the younger members of the royal family now, they're universally pretty popular. They've given quite a lot of themselves, very candidly speaking about the 20th anniversary of Diana's death last year. I think they're quite relatable and that the public quite likes them.
Question from Jennifer Mazzarolo, and it's a bit of a technical question. Do you have a camera person across from the door entrance? To give you a sense, Jennifer, there are indeed other cameras over there, and maybe Jared, who's behind the camera right now, can give you a live shot, but we actually have a partner in Reuters, which is a news agency, who have a camera over there. And so if you tune into our continuing coverage on CBC News Network, or in any of our platforms, you'll see those pictures in that video when indeed the entire family does come out. As it happens, we're near the door, but we're actually in the Commonwealth zone. So for people who thought, well, what do I ever get from the Commonwealth? Well, you get a spot here in the Commonwealth broadcaster zone.
And you get royal family. You get royal events that
absolutely.
you can feel a part of, because the Queen is your Queen. Yes, the Commonwealth zone. So some Aussies in here as well, aren't there? Some Kiwis.
Indeed.
Canadians. You guys are always in like the top of my league of people that ask me to contribute. So the Canadians and Australians seem to be the most interested in the royal family out of the Commonwealth countries, I think. I don't know whether you'll agree with that.
You know what? CBC, we cover the royals a lot. I spent a couple weeks in Australia a few years ago, and I was blown away by the level of coverage in the newspapers and on television. I understand there's lots of wishes of congratulations coming for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Will and Kate from Canadian, so congrats to the new parents again. I'd ask you if you would take a moment, Camilla, for those people who've just tuned in the past few minutes, if you could run through this idea of changes to legislation that make it so the gender of this child and other children who will come later is less relevant. It's less of a big deal.
It's less of a big deal. So back in the day, you would have a situation where if you had a daughter first, that daughter would be superseded by a younger son, because there was this notion that boys are more important than girls and they're the only ones that should rule. Those rules were changed just before Prince George was born, in case he was a girl, and the Cambridges would need to say, look, we want our firstborn to carry on the throne. We don't want her to be superseded by a younger brother. Of course, in the end, George was a boy and it's not a problem. But they put that legislation in place to make the monarchy more modern, and also to protect George's children when the time comes. If his firstborn is a daughter, they want her to be queen and not to be overtaken by a younger brother.
One last comment that I'm going to share with you before we have to leave you. Siobhan comments, it's so sad that Diana isn't around to see her grandbabies.
Yes.
I would ask you, Camilla, from what you see day to day from William and Harry, how is Diana's presence and her influence on them, how does that show up day to day?
Well, you see Diana through everything they do with their charity work, particularly Prince Harry and the way he behaves with people. And if you watch him at close quarters, he's so like his mother in his ability to just instantly connect, particularly with children. He's very good with children, and also children with special needs. Very, very natural. And I think really by being family orientated, we've actually seen William really mature and change and settle down with the Duchess of Cambridge. Becoming a dad seems to have been the making of him, and I think they're trying to emulate the best parts of their childhood. That also means that they're much more fiercely protective of the children's privacy than yesteryear. So people like me, we don't really interfere with their private lives. In the 80s and 90s it was different, but there's been a sea change. But generally I'd say Diana's legacy, it lives on through her boys, through all of the charity work they do, in direct correlation with hers. So AIDS and HIV, landmines, Harry's taken on, William's taken on homelessness. This whole mental health thing as well has been huge for the Cambridges and Prince Harry. And I think Meghan now, another addition, it's only going to add an extra sprinkling of stardust to royal life.
And presumably Diana's on the minds of many here today with this new addition, Little Prince, joining the royal family. Camilla Tominey, it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, and you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Royal editor at the Sunday Express. Thanks very much for tuning in online. Our coverage continues online on our social media platforms and, of course, on television and radio. I'm Thomas Daigle. Talk to you later.